The Galactic Council had exactly 47,293 rules. Commander Zeph of the Alterian fleet knew this because he had memorized every single one during his 300-year career. Rule number 1 was simple: never engage an enemy without proper authorization from 3 senior council members. Rule number 847 stated that all weapons must be registered and approved before use. Rule number 12,445 required a full diplomatic discussion before any military action. Tom Miller had read exactly 0 of these rules. The human sat in the command center of the Alterian flagship, his boots propped up on a control panel that cost more than most planets' annual budgets. His uniform was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and he was eating something called a sandwich while studying the tactical display. "This is completely wrong," Tom said, pointing at the screen with his sandwich. Commander Zeph's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "I beg your pardon, Human Miller. This battle plan was created by our finest strategic minds. It follows Protocol 23A for siege warfare, which has been tested and proven effective for over 2,000 years." Tom took another bite and shook his head. "Yeah, that's the problem. You're fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's thinking." The bridge went silent. 47 Alterian officers stared at the human in shock. Nobody questioned Protocol 23A. It was written by the legendary General Vorth himself, the greatest military mind in galactic history. "Human Miller," Zeph said carefully, "perhaps you misunderstand our situation. The Krex Empire has surrounded the Turion system. They have 500 warships. We have 200. Protocol 23A calls for a defensive formation while we wait for reinforcements. This is the logical approach." "Logical," Tom repeated, nodding. "Sure. And while you're being logical, the Krex are going to bombard 3 billion innocent people on Turion Prime. How long until reinforcements arrive?" 14 standard days. The planet will be dead in 3. Tom stood up and walked to the tactical display. He began moving the ship markers around with his fingers, completely ignoring the protests from the navigation officer about unauthorized access to military systems. "See, here's your problem," Tom continued, rearranging the fleet formation. "You're thinking like Alterians. The Krex are thinking like Krex. But I'm thinking like a human. And humans don't play by anyone's rules except our own." He pointed to the enemy formation on the screen. "The Krex have you surrounded, right? Classic siege tactic. They expect you to either try to break through their lines or sit here and wait. But what if you do neither?" "I don't understand," Zeph admitted. "What's the most important rule in space combat?" "Never leave your formation," came a voice from the back of the bridge. "Never engage without numerical superiority," suggested another officer. "Never attack without proper intelligence," added a third. Tom grinned. "Wrong, wrong, and wrong. The most important rule is this: there are no rules." He manipulated the display again, showing a completely different approach. Instead of maintaining formation, the human plan scattered the Alterian ships in seemingly random directions. "You want to save Turion Prime? Then stop thinking about fighting the Krex fleet and start thinking about your real mission. The Krex aren't here to fight you. They're here to destroy a planet. So don't give them what they want." "But if we scatter our forces," Zeph protested, "they can defeat us in detail. This violates every principle of space warfare." "Good," Tom said simply. "When you're outnumbered and outgunned, the last thing you want to do is fight fair." He began explaining his plan. Instead of forming defensive lines, the Alterian ships would split into tiny groups and attack the Krex supply lines. While the enemy fleet sat around Turion Prime expecting a big battle, the Alterians would be destroying fuel depots, ammunition ships, and communication relays scattered across 6 different star systems. "This is madness," whispered the navigation officer. "We'll be violating treaties with a dozen neutral systems. We'll be attacking civilian infrastructure. The Galactic Council will have us arrested." Better than being dead, Tom replied. Besides, what's Rule 1247? Zeph's eyes went wide. Military necessity supersedes civilian protection protocols in cases of imminent genocide. And Rule 3891. Emergency situations allow for temporary suspension of normal diplomatic procedures. The commander was beginning to see where the human was going. And my personal favorite, Rule 15003? Zeph consulted his memory banks. Victory achieved through unconventional means is still victory. He paused. But Human Miller, these rules are rarely invoked. The paperwork alone would take months. The council hearings would take years. Tom laughed. You know what I love about humans? We don't wait for permission to do the right thing. Over the next hour, Tom outlined his complete strategy. It was insane. It violated dozens of regulations. It required split-second timing and perfect coordination. It involved attacking civilian targets, crossing neutral borders without permission, and engaging in psychological warfare that bent several international laws. It was also brilliant. The Kreks think like conquerors, Tom explained. They want a glorious battle. They want to show their strength. Give them chaos instead. Make them chase shadows while their real target slips away. Slips away. Zeph was confused again. Tom smiled. Oh, did I forget to mention? We're not just saving Turion Prime. We're evacuating it. The bridge erupted in protests. Moving 3 billion people was impossible. There weren't enough ships in the entire galaxy. The logistics alone would take decades to plan. Actually, Tom said, pulling out a small device, I already started. He activated his communicator, and suddenly the main screen filled with images from around Turion Prime. Massive human cargo ships were descending through the atmosphere. Civilian transports were loading families by the thousands. Industrial vessels were moving entire city blocks. When did you? Zeph started to ask. About 6 hours ago. While you guys were having your strategy meeting, I called my people. Told them what was happening. They didn't ask for permission either. The Altarian officers watched in amazement as the evacuation proceeded at impossible speed. Human ships appeared from hyperspace every few minutes, loaded with supplies, equipment, and volunteers. There was no central command, no formal organization, no permits or paperwork. How are they coordinating this? Asked the communications officer. We're not detecting any official command signals. Tom shrugged. They're humans. They don't need someone to tell them how to help people. A new voice came over the comm system. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Transport Guild. We've got 50,000 refugees loaded and ready for jump. Where do you want them? Anywhere safe, Tom replied. You know what to do. Copy that. See you on the other side. Zeph stared at the human in wonder. You organized a mass evacuation involving hundreds of ships and millions of people in 6 hours. Without any official authorization. Without any government approval. Without following a single regulation. Yeah, Tom nodded. Like I said. Humans don't follow the rules. But the Kreks had noticed the evacuation too. Their fleet was beginning to move, preparing to intercept the refugee ships before they could escape. This is it, Tom announced. Time for the real plan. He turned to Zeph. Commander, I need you to do something that's going to violate about 30 different regulations. What? I need you to trust me. Zeph looked around his bridge. Every protocol he'd ever learned said this was wrong. Every regulation warned against this exact situation. Every rule in the book screamed that following a human's plan was military suicide. But 3 billion lives hung in the balance. What do you need? Zeph asked. Tom's grin was fierce. I need you to break some rules. As the Krek's fleet moved to intercept the refugee convoy, Tom began issuing orders that would have horrified every military academy in the galaxy. Ships broke formation without authorization. Weapons were armed without proper targeting approval. Communications were sent without diplomatic clearance. And for the first time in galactic history, someone was about to show the Krek's Empire what happened when humans stopped following the rules. The battle for Turion Prime was about to begin. But it wouldn't be the battle anyone expected. Because humans never fought the war their enemies wanted them to fight. The Krek's War Admiral Vorthak studied his tactical display with satisfaction. The foolish Altarians had scattered their fleet like frightened insects. Even worse, they were attempting some pathetic evacuation of the doomed planet below. Soon, the Krek's Empire would add another conquered world to its collection. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "the enemy ships are moving in completely random patterns. We cannot predict their next positions." "Excellent," Vorthak rumbled. "Fear has made them desperate. Order all ships to intercept the evacuation convoy. We will destroy their transports first, then hunt down their scattered warships one by one." What Admiral Vorthak didn't know was that Tom Miller was counting on exactly this reaction. "Phase 1 is working perfectly," Tom announced on the Altarian bridge. "The Kreks are doing exactly what I expected. They're focusing on the evacuation ships and ignoring our scattered fleet." Commander Zeph watched his tactical display with growing concern. "But Human Miller, our ships are completely out of position. When the Kreks attack our evacuation convoy, we won't be able to provide effective support." Tom smiled. "Who said anything about supporting the convoy?" Before Zeph could ask what he meant, Tom activated his communicator. "This is Miller to all human transport captains. Execute Plan Rabbit." Suddenly, every human ship in the evacuation convoy began moving in ways that defied all known military logic. Instead of running in straight lines towards safety, they started weaving, dodging, and splitting up in seemingly random directions. "What are they doing?" demanded the Altarian navigation officer. "They're making themselves harder to escort." "Harder to hit too," Tom pointed out. The Krek's fleet moved to intercept, but something strange began happening. Every time a Krek's ship locked onto a human transport, the target would suddenly change course in an impossible direction. Ships that should have been destroyed somehow slipped away at the last second. "How are they predicting our targeting systems?" Admiral Vorthak growled. His tactical officer checked the readings again. "Sir, I don't think they are predicting anything. Their movement patterns show no logic at all. They appear to be making random decisions." "Impossible. No military force operates without coordination." But that was exactly what the humans were doing. Each transport captain was making independent decisions based on nothing more than instinct and experience. There was no central command, no predetermined pattern, no way for the Kreks to predict what would happen next. "You see," Tom explained to the fascinated Altarian officers, "your people fight like a symphony orchestra. Every note planned, every movement coordinated. Beautiful, but predictable. Humans fight like a jazz band. We make it up as we go along." While the Krek's fleet chased the unpredictable evacuation convoy, Tom's real plan was just beginning. "Commander Zeph," Tom said, "remember those scattered ships of yours? Time for Phase 2. Tom's fingers danced across the tactical display, sending coded messages to the dispersed Altarian vessels. But these weren't normal military orders. They were suggestions, requests, and in some cases, complete improvisations. "Captain Morix," Tom called to one ship, "see that Krek supply depot in the Zentera system? I bet they're not expecting visitors." "Captain Nils, there's a Krek's communication relay about 3 light-years from your position. Might be worth checking out." "Captain Yen, those Krek's reinforcements heading this way probably need their fuel convoy intact. Shame if something happened to it." Across 6 different star systems, Altarian ships began attacking targets that no military manual had ever suggested hitting. They struck supply depots during shift changes. They hit communication relays during maintenance windows. They destroyed fuel convoys while they were refueling. The attacks made no sense from a traditional military perspective. They were scattered, uncoordinated, and hit targets of questionable strategic value. But they had one thing in common: they worked. "Admiral," reported a panicked Krex communications officer, "we're receiving distress calls from 17 different locations. Our supply lines are under attack." Vorthak spun toward the tactical display. "Impossible. The enemy fleet is here, chasing our attack on their evacuation. Sir, it appears they left small groups behind to harass our logistics. Then send ships to deal with them." "Which ones, sir?" "They're hitting us in 17 different places at once." This was the beauty of Tom's plan. Traditional military doctrine said you should never divide your forces because it weakened your overall strength. But Tom had realized that sometimes weakness in one area could create overwhelming strength in another. By scattering the Alterian fleet, he had forced the Krex to choose: protect their supply lines or continue their attack on Turion Prime. They couldn't do both effectively. Admiral Vorthak made his choice. Continue the attack on the evacuation convoy. Our supply lines can handle a few raids. But the raids weren't stopping. Every time the Krex sent ships to protect one supply depot, the Alterians would hit 2 others. When they reinforced their communication networks, the humans would target their medical stations. When they protected their fuel supplies, their food convoys would disappear. "Sir," reported another Krex officer, "our field commanders are requesting permission to fall back and protect their supply lines." "Denied." Vorthak roared. "We will complete our mission." On the Alterian flagship, Tom was monitoring the chaos with satisfaction. The Krex are learning an important lesson about fighting humans. We don't just break your rules. We make you break your own. Commander Zeph was beginning to understand. By attacking their logistics, you're forcing them to choose between their mission and their survival. "Better than that," Tom replied. "I'm making them fight a dozen different battles at once. And humans love chaos. The more confused everything gets, the better we perform." As if to prove his point, Captain Sarah Chen's voice crackled over the communicator. "Miller, this is Chen. My convoy just picked up some Krex fighters trying to intercept us. Want to see something cool?" "Show me," Tom replied. On the main screen, they watched as Captain Chen's transport convoy did something no military academy in the galaxy taught. Instead of running from the Krex fighters, they split up and started playing what could only be described as a game of three-dimensional tag among the asteroids. The human transports, loaded with refugees and completely unarmed, began leading the Krex fighters on a chase through an asteroid field. They ducked under floating rocks, swerved around debris, and performed maneuvers that should have been impossible for such large ships. "How are civilian transports outmaneuvering military fighters?" asked the amazed Alterian weapons officer. "Because," Tom said with pride, "those aren't military pilots. They're truck drivers, freight haulers, and cargo runners. They've been navigating asteroid fields and space debris their entire careers. The Krex pilots have been flying in empty space with clear targeting solutions." One by one, the Krex fighters began making mistakes. They flew too close to asteroids, misjudged distances, or simply couldn't keep up with the humans' unpredictable movements. Within an hour, the entire Krex squadron had either crashed into rocks or given up the chase. "Convoy secure," Captain Chen reported cheerfully. "Though I think we just invented a new sport. Asteroid tag, anyone?" Admiral Vorthak was no longer satisfied. He was furious. "Report," he demanded. "Sir, we've lost contact with 43 supply depots, 16 communication relays, 8 fuel convoys, and 27 support vessels. The enemy evacuation convoy has successfully escaped to hyperspace. And our fighter squadrons are requesting rescue after becoming lost in an asteroid field. How is this possible? We outnumbered them more than 2 to 1. His tactical officer hesitated before answering. Sir, it appears that traditional tactical analysis doesn't apply to human combat doctrine. They don't fight like any known species. Vorthak studied his remaining forces. Half his fleet was scattered across 6 systems trying to protect supply lines that were already destroyed. His remaining ships were damaged from chasing evacuation convoys through dangerous terrain. And somehow, the smaller Alterian fleet was still intact and still causing problems. New plan, Vorthak announced. We regroup our entire fleet and destroy their homeworld. If we cannot defeat them here, we'll eliminate their source. But Tom Miller was already 3 steps ahead. Commander Zeph, Tom said, how long until the Kreks figure out they can't win this battle the way they're fighting it? Zeph checked his chronometer. Based on their losses, I estimate another hour before they withdraw or change tactics. Perfect. That gives us just enough time for Phase 3. There's a Phase 3? Zeph asked nervously. Tom's grin was dangerous. Oh yes. Because the thing about humans is, we don't just break the rules during battle. We break them after we've already won. He activated the ship-wide communications system. Attention all vessels, human and Alterian. This is Tom Miller. We've got 1 hour to show the Kreks Empire why you should never pick a fight with species that don't believe in fair play. Across the fleet, human and Alterian voices began responding with enthusiasm that would have terrified any regulation-following military force. What do you need, Miller? Ready to break more rules. Tell us where to aim. Tom looked at Commander Zeph. Ready to really shock the Galactic Council? I'm beginning to think, Zeph replied slowly, that following human logic might be more effective than following regulations. Now you're learning, Tom said. Phase 3 is about to begin. The battle for Turion Prime was far from over. But the war itself had already changed forever. Because once the galaxy learned what humans could do when they stopped following the rules, nothing would ever be the same. Admiral Vorthak stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In 3 hours of battle, his superior Kreks fleet had accomplished nothing except chasing shadows and losing supply ships. The humans had turned what should have been a simple planetary conquest into complete chaos. Sir, his communications officer reported, High Command is demanding an explanation for our delays. Tell them we are dealing with an enemy that fights without logic or honor, Vorthak growled. But no matter. Order all ships to regroup at my position. We'll end this with one coordinated attack on their main fleet. What Admiral Vorthak didn't know was that Tom Miller had been waiting for exactly this decision. There it is, Tom announced on the Alterian bridge. The Kreks are finally doing what every military academy teaches. They're consolidating their forces for a proper battle. Commander Zeph felt a moment of hope. Perhaps we can face them in traditional combat formation now. Oh no, Tom said with a dangerous smile. We're way past traditional combat. Time to show them what humans call creative problem solving. Tom activated his communicator to address the entire combined fleet. All ships, this is Miller. The Kreks want a fair fight. But here's the thing about humans, we never learned what fair means. He began issuing orders that made every Alterian officer on the bridge question their sanity. Instead of forming battle lines, the human and Alterian ships began moving into positions that violated every principle of space warfare. Captain Chen, Tom called to the transport leader, your evacuation ships got all those refugees to safety, right? Confirmed, Miller. 3 billion people are now in secure systems. Good. Now I need you to do something completely insane. My favorite kind of order. What do you need? Tom outlined his plan. Within minutes, the human transport ships that had just completed the evacuation began returning to the battlefield. But they weren't coming back empty. Commander Zeph, Tom explained, what's the one thing every military regulation says you should never bring to a space battle? Zeph thought carefully. Civilians? Exactly. So naturally, that's exactly what we're bringing. The main screen lit up with incoming ships. Hundreds of human vessels were arriving, but these weren't warships. They were mining ships, construction vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, and even space garbage trucks. Every human civilian ship within 50 light-years was converging on the battle zone. "This is Captain Ross of the mining vessel Deep Digger," came a cheerful voice over the comm. "Heard you folks needed some help with a pest problem. Captain Williams of Stellar Construction here. We brought some tools that might be useful. Sanitation ship Lucky Lady reporting. We specialize in taking out the trash." Admiral Vorthak watched the approaching civilian vessels with confusion. What are they doing? Are they trying to evacuate more civilians? "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "sensors indicate those ships are carrying industrial equipment, not people." Industrial equipment? What possible use could that have in battle? The Kreks were about to find out. Tom's voice echoed across the human fleet. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Kreks Empire believes that military power comes from big guns and heavy armor. Time to show them that human power comes from big imaginations and zero respect for the rulebook." The first wave of civilian ships reached the battle zone, and immediately began doing things that no military textbook had ever considered. Mining ships deployed their or extraction beams, but instead of targeting asteroids, they began carving up Krek's hull plating like hot knives through butter. Construction vessels activated their industrial welders and started fusing Krek's weapon systems to their own hulls. Cargo ships opened their massive loading bays and began using magnetic grapples to literally steal Krek's fighters right out of space. "Sir," screamed a Krek's weapons officer, "they're using construction equipment as weapons." "Industrial tools don't qualify as weapons under galactic law," protested another officer. Admiral Vorthak watched in horror as a human garbage truck extended its collection arm and began stuffing disabled Krek's fighters into its trash compactor. "This has to be illegal." But Tom Miller was just getting started. "Phase 3, Part 2, he announced. Time to show them human teamwork. What happened next would be studied in military academies for centuries. The human civilian ships began working together with a coordination that seemed impossible without central command. Mining ships would weaken enemy hulls, then construction ships would break them apart, while cargo vessels collected the pieces and garbage trucks cleaned up the debris. They turned a space battle into an industrial operation. "How are they coordinating this?" demanded Admiral Vorthak. "We're detecting no command signals." His tactical officer was studying the sensor readings in amazement. "Sir, it appears they're using civilian radio frequencies. They're coordinating this battle using the same communication methods they use for everyday work." "Captain Ross," came a voice over the human channels, "I've got a Krek's destroyer with damaged shields at coordinates 445 Mark 12. Copy that, Williams. I'll soften up the hull plating for you. Lucky Lady here. I'll swing by afterward to collect the debris." "Thanks, Lucky Lady. Anyone seen my mining laser? I think I left it stuck in a Krek's battleship." The Krek's fleet found itself fighting an enemy that treated combat like a construction project. Every human ship knew exactly what every other human ship could do, because they had been working together for years in civilian jobs. Commander Zeph watched in fascination as the human fleet dismantled Krek's ships with industrial precision. "It's like watching a team of mechanics take apart an engine." "That's exactly what it is," Tom agreed. "These people have been fixing, building, and moving things through space their entire careers. Fighting is just another job to them." But the most shocking moment came when a damaged Krek's fighter pilot ejected from his destroyed ship. According to all military protocols, the human ships should have either captured him or left him for pickup by his own forces. Instead, Captain Chen's transport ship immediately changed course to rescue him. "Chen, what are you doing?" Tom asked. "Picking up a stranded pilot," she replied matter-of-factly. "It's basic space law. You don't leave people floating in the void." "But he's the enemy. He's also a person in trouble." We'll sort out the enemy part after we make sure he doesn't die. Admiral Vorthak watched in complete bewilderment as human ships began rescuing Krek's survivors from destroyed vessels. They were saving the lives of the same people they had just been fighting. "Sir," his communications officer reported with confusion, "the humans are requesting permission to transfer our wounded to their medical ships." "It's a trick," Vorthak declared. "Sir, our medical officer has reviewed their treatment protocols. Their offer appears genuine. They're providing better medical care than our own ships can offer." This was too much for the Krek's commander. His forces were being systematically dismantled by civilian construction workers, garbage collectors, and miners. His wounded were being treated by the enemy with better care than his own military could provide. And somehow, he was losing a battle to people who seemed to treat war like just another day at work. "All ships," Vorthak commanded, "full retreat." But Tom Miller wasn't finished. "Now comes the really fun part," Tom announced. "Anyone want to see what happens when humans decide to redecorate?" The human civilian ships began working on the abandoned Krek's equipment floating in space. Construction ships welded broken parts together in new configurations. Mining ships carved artistic patterns into hull plating. Cargo ships arranged the debris into geometric shapes. Within an hour, the entire battle zone had been transformed into what could only be described as the galaxy's largest piece of abstract art. "What are they doing now?" Admiral Vorthak asked from his retreating flagship. "Sir, it appears they're building a sculpture." "A what?" "A sculpture, sir. They're using our destroyed ships to create some kind of artistic monument." Tom's voice broadcast on all frequencies, including the retreating Krek's ships. "This is a message from humanity to the Krek's empire. This artwork is titled, 'What Happens When You Pick a Fight with People Who Fix Things for a Living.' Feel free to visit anytime. We'll be here." 3 days later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss the Battle of Turion Prime. "The humans violated 847 different military regulations," announced the council speaker. "They used civilian equipment as weapons. They ignored all protocols for space combat. They turned a battlefield into an art installation. They also," added Commander Zeph, "saved 3 billion lives, defeated a superior enemy force, and did it all without losing a single ship." "That's not the point," protested the Alterian military representative. "Rules exist for good reasons." Tom Miller stood up from his seat in the gallery. He had been invited to attend the hearing, though nobody was quite sure what his official status was. "With respect," Tom said, "your rules are designed to fight the wars you've already fought. But humans don't fight old wars. We fight the war that needs to be fought right now. But without regulations, without protocols, how do you maintain order?" asked the council speaker. Tom smiled. "We don't maintain order. We make things work. There's a difference." The council spent 3 weeks debating the implications of the human approach to warfare. They wrote new regulations about civilian equipment in combat zones. They created protocols for unconventional tactics. They established procedures for artistic monuments in former battle sites. But they all knew the truth: the next time humans fought a war, they would find completely new ways to break completely different rules. Because that's what humans did. They looked at problems nobody had solved, ignored all the reasons why solutions were impossible, and then fixed things anyway. 6 months later, the Krek's Empire requested a peace treaty with humanity. Their official reason was strategic realignment of imperial priorities. Their real reason was simpler: they had realized that fighting humans was like trying to nail smoke to a wall while the smoke redesigned the hammer and turned the wall into a work of art. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humans didn't just break rules. They rewrote reality. And they did it all while helping anyone who needed it, building things that lasted, and making sure everybody got home safely. Even their enemies. Especially their enemies. Because that was the most human thing of all.